How do you know what you don't know? That's the scariest concept to me, is that you could just be going forth with your best effort, your best heart, and your purest intentions, but you don't know what you don't know. And in the end, that's what's going to get you. So you have to try to ask questions to reveal what you don't know that you didn't know, right? That's a challenge. But in the end, should we pause and ensure that we're both trying to get the right guy?
Welcome to Any Insights Yet? The podcast that explores the intersection of strategy, inspiration, and branding. I'm Chris Kochek. On today's episode, we're talking to forensic expert and crime scene analyst Alina Burroughs from the hit documentary show Crime Scene Confidential, now streaming on Max. At first glance, marketing and forensic science may seem worlds apart, but as Alina reveals, both require the ability to analyze evidence and follow a trail of clues, leading to critical decisions that are based on imperfect information. In this conversation, Alina and I talk about actual crime scene investigations and how she got to those important aha moments that helped break those cases open. Along the way, we discuss how crime scene investigators combat cognitive bias and why the simplest details, often overlooked, can lead to the biggest insights. Whether you're solving a murder or crafting a marketing strategy, Alina reminds us that knowing what's missing can be just as important as recognizing what's there. So if you've always wanted to know some of the secrets of crime scene investigators or how to connect the dots between murder and marketing, then I promise you, you're going to love this episode. Please note, this interview contains some discussions of crime scene investigations involving suicide and some graphic details related to homicide that some viewers may find disturbing. Let's get into it. What's one of the most interesting or unusual overlaps between murder and marketing?
I was thinking about that. If I wrote a book, I could call it Murder and Marketing, the quest to find the right guy, right? I think it's all related to people, emotion, and motive. And those are things that both marketing and criminal investigators are looking for.
Now, do you guys actually do that thing that they always do in the movies or in television shows where there are pictures on the wall and red threads connecting between everything? Or is that just a visual device for television shows?
Yeah, I feel maybe I'm missing out a little because I never did that in my career. No, it's not something that I ever saw done. It's a great visual, right, for connecting the dots that we are connecting. We look for 3 connections: victim, suspect, crime scene. It's called the crime scene triangle. So every piece of information that we get should connect back to a victim, a suspect, or the crime scene. So when you see that visual, that's a visual representation of what we're doing in our heads.
But how do you keep track of everything? Do you just keep it on a notes app on your phone? Do you write it down? Are you like Memento Man? You tattoo key clues on your body somewhere?
Yeah, that's why I'm covered in ink. Everybody's different, right? Some people are visual learners and some people need to physically write. I need to physically write. Like if I have something that I need to get out, I'm going to pen and paper it. If you're not a little OCD going into crime scene, I assure you, you will be by the time you're out.
So what's one of the hardest things about being a crime scene investigator?
I think one of the misconceptions that maybe makes it a little hard is that the actual time that an investigator spends on a crime scene is probably about 10% of what the job entails. So people think because of television or whatever else that we're just all the time on a crime scene. We have report writing, right? We take notes on the crime scene. We take photographs. All of those things have to be uploaded to secure sources. We've got to visit places. There's evidence at the hospital when people have surgery to remove a bullet. We're driving to the hospital to pick that up. There's evidence from the morgue. We go to the morgue, things that are removed from autopsy. So we're driving back and forth, right? We're taking evidence, we're processing evidence, packaging it, labeling it, driving it to an evidence facility. So there's a lot of stuff that a crime scene investigator does that isn't what people think of. And I think that's very parallel to marketing. When you say marketing, everyone thinks advertisement, a commercial that you see on television or something that you see in a magazine. But there's event planning, there's branding, there's PR and press releases, there's all kinds of stuff to be done. So I think we both kind of come from these backgrounds of people think they know, but they probably don't.
And there's research too. I mean, what you were just talking about is the output of marketing, right? But to get to great outputs, there's a lot of research, like digging things up and trying to understand something, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you deal with conflicting personalities on a crime scene investigation?
Anytime you have people, you're going to deal with conflicting personalities. I think an issue that I have faced in the past is I am, and I like to say, professionally curious. And I don't mean that as I am professional when I am curious. It means that I am curious like it's my job. Every day, I Google multiple things just because I'm like, that's weird. Why do we call it that? Or what's this, right? All of that curiosity, that information, I think is critical to doing a job, especially an investigation. But some people, some leaders or coworkers could see asking questions as challenging authority.
Have you developed certain question softeners to make the question feel less threatening?
I have. So the number one word used to describe me by others is intimidating. And I don't feel there's anything remotely intimidating about me, but I've heard it a million times, enough that I need to take that and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know coming straight out the gate that there's going to be an intimidation factor when I ask a question. So I do try to, instead of straight out, why are we doing it this way? Right? Because that almost implies a judgment to the way that it's being done. Try to ask questions that lead people to make their own conclusions. Because when they make their own conclusions, it's much stronger than me making it and telling you. So one of my favorite techniques is from Chris Voss, a former hostage negotiator, and he's got some great interview tactics. One of my favorites is, you must have a really good reason for feeling that way. Or, okay, help me understand how you got there. Because those both seem to be more curious to the side of, I'm interested in what you have to say and I want to know more, instead of shutting it down like, well, that's a terrible idea. We need to do it a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, he always uses this phrase, how am I supposed to do that? Right? Like when you're sort of stalling and you use the late night radio DJ voice.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to do that?
Help me understand.
That's right. That's right. So we're just going to conduct the rest of the interview in this soft voice for the rest of the time. But seriously, what are one or two questions that you almost always ask when you're approaching a new crime scene investigation?
You have to ask what's there that should not be and what is missing that should be here.
What's there that should not be? Can you give me an example of something in one of your investigations where something was there that you're like, that shouldn't be there?
A dirt footprint on carpet underneath a window.
And what did that lead to? What did that open up for you?
So when you come in with kind of a blank slate and you think, what's here that should not be, that's going to guide you to what somebody could have potentially left behind, right? So if I look around and I see a clean, vacuumed floor, then I can make an assumption about the owners that live there and the state that the house is normally kept in. And a muddy shoe track on that white carpet is going to say, pretty obviously, that doesn't belong there. That's not part of their normal living condition. So how does the mud get there? Did the person enter through that way? Did they pop in through a window and step down because it was rainy the night before? All of those things. But just asking yourself that question, what's here that shouldn't be? It's a little harder to say what should be here that isn't.
The absence of something,
right.
Missing something.
Right. I am at a disadvantage when I enter other people's homes and lives as to how they normally live, right? Because I'm trying to decide what's not right. So if you had a burglary in your office, you would say, I'm missing the little marble thing that used to sit there, right? How do I know that you had a little marble thing on your desk? Mm-hmm. So it's challenging, but you have to ask yourself both of those questions.
But then sometimes you could find a picture that shows that there was a marble thing on the desk. And then you're like, hey, this picture would show that this is there. And this wasn't there now. So you really have to have all your senses open all the time.
Always hypervigilant, every single sense.
Do you do special exercises to be more sensory aware?
I think I was drawn to this job for a reason, right? I think it's a little bit, people go into this career because they are predisposed to it. And then you kind of hone that while you're there. So I am HSP, if you've heard of that, highly sensitive person, or an empath, if you will. So an empath is somebody that typically can put themselves in somebody else's shoes. I understand why people do what they do. It's not fun to be in a role where you constantly have to put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's done some pretty bad things, especially when I'm looking at an investigation, a cold case, a serial murder. You have to not hover over and look at it from an outside perspective. You have to physically be that person and think, why did I choose this house? Why did I choose this victim? Why did I come in the window, not the door? Every single decision that's being made, why does that person make that decision?
And that relates so well to marketing because you have to get in the heads of the customer or potential customer and understand, why didn't they click on this button that we made so big? Or why didn't they do this? Or why did they do this thing over here? And a lot of times people will just explain it away. I don't know. They're just dumb.
Right.
So there's a lot of overlaps between what you do and the marketing world. Are there any questions that you've asked time and again that have ended up taking you in an unexpected but positive direction?
When you do something day after day, you fight that natural instinct to be like, I know what this is, right? I've seen this 100 times. If the stove is hot and you touch it and you burn yourself, you learn, I'm not going to touch the stove anymore. So how is it different when, if you work 20, 30 of the same type of cases, for you not to get that mindset of, yeah, I know what this is. I do ABC. The problem is every crime scene is not the same. You can't always apply ABC to that crime scene, right? It's a unique beast. So you have to always be asking questions about not only the ones that I've already mentioned, but just how is this different than what I've seen before? You have to challenge your own bias. You have to say, what evidence do I have that this is what I think it is? What evidence do I have that this is not what I think it is? Otherwise, you're going to overlook something.
Well, we're going to be talking about bias here in just a second. Before we get to bias, though, I want to talk about some of the forensic techniques and tools that you use and whether there may be some ideas for marketing there. So crime scenes have forensic tools like fingerprint dusting. You guys use, I think it's called luminol. Is that right?
Yeah, luminol is a little 2010.
Okay.
They use something called Blue Star now. Luminol would interfere with DNA potentially. So they kind of made a new and improved.
Okay.
It does not.
You can see how old my crime scene investigation show watching is, but is there a forensic toolkit that you use in your work in marketing that helps lead you to more aha moments?
I think the forensic toolkit everybody really has access to is our own brains, our curiosity, our empathy. All of those things are going to get us the right direction. But crime scene investigators use something called presumptive tests. Right. So we have presumptive tests if we're saying, I think that's blood, but, I could be wrong. Right. So sometimes we're looking at older blood, dried blood. We literally have had cases of homicide in an Italian restaurant where there is mixed blood and red spaghetti sauce. So if somebody needs to know, I think this is blood, but I'm not positive, we have presumptive kits. So we can swab that little tiny bit of blood and get a chemical reaction that tells us, yes, this is blood. This is what we're dealing with. We have those presumptive kits for drugs, right? This might be, it's white powder. I don't know what it is, right? I can think of a few things, but maybe I want to test those. So we have presumptive testing in the forensic world. And I think there's presumptive testing in marketing too. You just don't call it the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always asking, is that what's really going on here? Right? That's my presumptive test. So you see a behavior in the wild and you can explain it away, or this way. But I think that the trick is always stopping and asking, is that what's really going on?
Yes.
And of course, leadership doesn't like that a lot of times because they just want to go. Let's just do something. Let's just make something. And there is something to be said about having a bias toward action, but there's also something to be said about pausing and saying, what are my own biases? And is what I'm seeing actually what's really going on?
Absolutely. It's like, how do you know what you don't know? That's the scariest concept to me, is that you could just be going forth with your best effort, your best heart, and your purest intentions, but you don't know what you don't know. And in the end, that's what's going to get you. So you have to try to ask questions to reveal what you don't know that you didn't know, right? That's a challenge. But in the end, should we pause and ensure that, like I said at the beginning, we're both trying to get the right guy. Do we want to just get a guy, or do we want to get the right guy? Marketing is the same, right? We can't just go make an arrest because we think something. We need some more information. And Yeah, I think marketing is very similar. You can't just move towards a campaign without a little bit of accuracy, a little precision.
Oh, but you can, Alina. And many people do. Well, let's just think for a second, thinking about language, people talk about spray and pray, or we're going to send
shotgun versus rifle.
Yep. We're going to send out an email blast. We're going to blast our customers with this messaging. First of all, the language is very violent.
It is. I don't want to be blasted. I had posted something on LinkedIn about pitch slapping. The new phrase when you're just reaching out to, like, you don't know the person. You're not, hey, let's talk, let's meet. It's just like, Pam, here's my pitch. You just like, I got pitch slapped.
Oh, that's a good phrase. I'm going to have to use that. So a big part of your job is looking at evidence and connecting the dots between clues, right? Can you think of a situation in Crime Scene Confidential where people were looking one place and you said, wait a minute, guys, I think we need to be looking at these details over here?
Almost always. I thought of an example from season 1 and from season 2. When we look at wrongfully convicted individuals, it is nearly always the result of somebody looking so hard at one person, one piece of evidence, one direction, that they ignore so much evidence to the contrary. In season 1, we had Tim Masters, who was convicted. He was 15 at the time of the crime. He was convicted of the murder of Peggy Hetrick in Colorado. And he was convicted of this crime that no 15-year-old should have the capability of doing. And, I had a chance to chat with him. Season 2, we had Ray Crone, who was an individual who was convicted not once, but twice for the murder of Kim Ancona based on bad information. So bad information in my world leads to wrongful convictions, right? It could lead to somebody getting the death penalty, right? That's the ultimate, right? Do we have the wrong person that we're holding accountable, putting in on death row? There's a gentleman who is the oldest person on death row in Florida right now, Tommy Ziegler, who they refused to analyze the DNA evidence. He was convicted in the mid to late 70s before DNA testing was available, and they made his entire case on their theory of what happened without evidence to support it. And so in 2020s, somebody comes along and says, we can actually prove that that is not what happened. This man was convicted on a story that a prosecutor came up with.
So how do you help people see things a different way?
Nobody wants to be told what to do. Nobody wants to be told that they're wrong. What I've seen also is a pattern of, once a bad decision is made, sticking by that bad decision, right? It's very hard to go, you know what? I might have made a mistake. Let's backtrack on that. How often do you hear somebody do that? Not in law enforcement, not in the corporate world. I've been both. So ego is going to always get in the way. You have to not have the ego. Nobody knows everything. I certainly don't. I'm not an expert in everything. I know a little bit about a lot of things. Reach out to other people, ask questions, use all of your resources. But I think ultimately, rather than telling somebody, you have the wrong person, let's think about how we could reach more people, right, in marketing. How do we make sure we're reaching the right person?
Right. Well, and nobody wants to end up with egg on their face. And of course, there's this crumbling sandcastle of identity, right? Where if you got this wrong, then you might be wrong about this, this, and this. And what are you doing being a leader of this organization if you missed these things? And so it's very much tied into organizational politics, ego, things like that. Are there any other phrases that you like to use to be gentle with people and get them to think of things a little differently?
It's more than a question. I think it's how you are as a human, how you talk to people, how you relate to people.
Yeah. And body language is a huge part of that, right? It's not just your words, it's how you say those words, the tone you use, the way you lean in or don't lean in. What you made me think of when you were talking about getting so focused on one thing, and this is bringing in a photography analogy, but it feels like so much of the time businesses are using a telephoto lens when maybe they should be using a wide angle lens sometimes.
Back up. Yeah. Back up. I mean, I would start with some aerial photographs, maybe some drone footage. Then let's kind of zoom in a little and then keep going from there. But if you start pinpointed, where do you go from there?
Oh, it's a great example. So you mentioned bias a little bit ago. What are 3 big biases that people usually come into a situation with, both in crime scene situations and potentially in marketing situations?
Oof. So I speak about bias a lot because I'm convinced that no human has a personality. We're just a collection of bias.
Biases and neuroses.
That's it. Well, sure. I mean, I have no personality if you take both of those out of there. So people know some of the big bias, right? When we talk about like racial prejudice, prejudice against somebody for sexual orientation, that's what they think of when we think bias. When we talk about cognitive bias, and cognitive bias is critical for marketers and homicide investigators, because that is strictly how people think. It's how do we receive information? How do we filter that information? How do we process that information? And there are around 188 types of cognitive bias.
Wow.
Right? So if I ask people to list a few, they'd say racism, maybe prejudice against a certain group of people, handicapped people. But I want to look at cognitive bias. So the number one bias that we see in both fields is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is particularly insidious because we don't know we're doing it. Confirmation bias says, man, I really think it's this. I really think it's this guy, right? Or I think this is our target audience. So when you have evidence that comes up that says, maybe it's not, you ignore it. You only look for the things that support your idea of what's right. Our brains want so badly to be right that we seek out information to support our thought process and we abandon anything else. And I've called it cafeteria style investigation, right? You don't take your tray and slide it down the go and go, I think I'll take that. I think I'll take this and I'll put these things on my tray. You have to take everything. You look at everything and what it's telling you, not just the things you like to put on your tray. Confirmation bias, number one.
Yes. What's another one?
Motivation bias, of course, right? Why do we do what we do? So when we look at wrongful arrest, when we look at, do we have a guy or the right guy? And I use guy to mean human. Why are we motivated to get through something quickly? So there are a lot of political, maybe social pressures. When it comes to law enforcement, you have a homicide in a nice affluent town. People are going to demand that you find that person and you hold them accountable. So then law enforcement's like, well, we have this person. They could have done it. Now we're talking about motivational bias. You got a captain, you got a chief, an undersheriff, and a sheriff going, I got to make an arrest because I'm up for re-election.
Mm-hmm.
You got a community of people saying, I pay your salary. These are my tax dollars at work. What are you doing? Are those people and those pressures, are they as concerned with getting justice? Or do they want to feel like they can sleep at night thinking, oh, thank goodness, that person's off the streets.
Right. Solve the problem and solve it quickly.
That's it. So I need a solution, right? Give me something. Is it the right thing? Give me something.
Mm-hmm. And is there a third one?
I could talk about this for about 2 hours. So if you want to start me on a podcast called Bias, then we can do that. I think attribution bias is big. I can tell you right now, you have an idea in your head, whether or not you know it or not, of what a criminal is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a man? Is it a woman? Are they old? Are they young? You don't know that you have an idea of what a criminal is until you see something on TV and you go, oof, that's not what I thought a criminal was, right? You might not say that out loud. You might not recognize it. Why do we have some that make the news and some that don't? Because it's probably not your idea of what a criminal is. A young mother, oh, she could never do that. A doctor, a pastor, oh no, they're a good person because they do this, right? You attribute characteristics to that person based on something that you think, well, they're attractive. In our minds, criminals are not attractive. So if you see a mugshot of somebody attractive, it's going to make the news because they go, wait, what? That's not what I thought a criminal looked like. So I think, of the 188, there's so many that come to play every day with our decision making. But confirmation bias is certainly the number one for me. But I think motivation and attribution bias are right up there.
Now, is there a crime scene situation that you can think of where you caught yourself having a bias, where somebody had to kind of point out to you like, Alina, I think you might be going down, this path? If so, what was the situation and what was the bias?
No, I don't think personally I've ever been so leaning in one direction because I am very devil's advocate. Certainly I'm not perfect. Probably I don't know when I was being biased if nobody brought it to my attention. But I think bias can start in law enforcement when you get dispatched to a call. I'll get dispatched to a suicide. So my brain has already heard the words suicide. That means something different than homicide, right? I have to go to that scene and say, okay, why is this potentially yes, but why is this potentially no? There are a lot of people that are motivated to commit murder and make it look like something else. So I can't go into a scene, even though I've been dispatched. And when you get there, they go, yeah, it's a suicide, right? You detectives and law enforcement, everybody's telling you the same thing. And then you have to go in. That's where those questions, why is this what I think it is? Why is this something else? Come into play. I would stand there literally and say, okay, let me look for reasons that I'm wrong. And if you can't find any, okay. But you have to look for reasons, not just that you're right or dispatch is right or the detective is right, but reasons why you're wrong.
Let's go back to Chris Voss for a second, because you just made me think of a question. What makes you say that? Right. And I feel like that's a harder edged way of saying that. Like you just mentioned, somebody says it's a suicide. My first inclination is to say, what makes you say that? Now, maybe if I put on my late night DJ voice, it might be softer. What makes you say that? But is there an even softer way of getting someone to confront the fact that it might not be a suicide, that it might be something else? How would you phrase the question, or how would you say it?
I think first step, you need to validate. So that disarms.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you feel that it's this, or, okay, you have this set of beliefs, valid. This has really come into play when I've interviewed family members for the television show, and they have a belief about one way that the crime is, but the evidence is really telling me something otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a vested interest in holding their belief. That is the first thing you have to understand. What is that vested interest? It's emotional in my field, because people don't want to think maybe my loved one committed suicide. What did I do wrong? What did I overlook? I don't want to think that they were so unhappy or so miserable. So I think it really depends on why that person is vested.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. I think understanding the vested interest, validating them to a certain extent, not to the point that you're saying you're right.
You don't agree, but you can say that's a valid thought. Yeah.
Right. Like you said earlier, which is you must have some really good reasons to believe this.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. You must have a really good reason of thinking that. It's also the advice that I used when people are going to Thanksgiving dinners or holiday dinners, a wedding, something where they're going to meet somebody that has opposing political views, and you don't want to have that kind of conversation. You don't want it to be confrontational. Wow, you must have a really good reason for feeling that way.
Does it ever come off as like, are you patronizing me?
Well, it depends on the delivery there. My minor is in communication. So we know that more of our communication is nonverbal than verbal. So we can say the thing as nicely as we mean. But if we're rolling our eyes or have our hands crossed, it's going to tell a bit of a different story.
So on the subject of biases and what we said earlier, people often want to rush to the right answer. They want to solve the case closed. But it's super important to entertain every possibility, sometimes outlandish possibilities. But of course, the challenge with that is that people are afraid of looking or sounding stupid. What do you do in those situations?
Say the stupid thing. I mean, with my whole chest, say the stupid thing. You have to let go, whether it's business or personal relationships, you have to let go of your vested interest in people liking you or thinking of you as fill in the blank, right? Whatever it is you want people to think. I have to let go of my need to be liked or perceived in a certain fashion. So say the stupid thing. Also, when you say the stupid thing, more importantly, you give other people permission to say the stupid thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always a stupid thing. It's because you think it's stupid, because you have those filters. You have, a little bit of, gosh, am I good enough? Or, am I sitting in the right room? And I always think of the movie Sharknado. At some point, someone sat down in a conference room and said, let's make a movie about a tornado that throws sharks around. If you can understand that, if you literally can think about the boardroom where somebody sat and pitched that concept, then you should be able to say the stupid thing in your meeting. If Sharknado exists, say the stupid thing.
Other great films to go with that: Hot Tub Time Machine, Snakes on a Plane.
You have to think of people pitching these, like the corporate world. They're sitting there saying, yeah, Samuel L. Jackson, he's on a plane, ton of snakes.
That's it. That's the story.
That's it. Then they land. Credits. Right. So sometimes when you say what you think is the stupid thing, it's not the stupid thing. Sometimes it evolves. It sparks something in somebody else to go, oh, you know what? What about this? Right. I was reading your book and I had an insight from that. Why are comedians oftentimes more poignant or insightful than priests, than politicians? Because they're not confined to a box. That is my answer to that question, right? They're not confined to a box. They can say the stupid thing, right? If you're a priest, a pastor, a politician, you're very afraid, I'm going to say the stupid thing and then it's going to be on CNN. I will tell you that I branded a series of online education at a company. And usually my thought process starts off with a bunch of words. 3 words. What's your brand, right? What do you want people to think of you? Wrote down a bunch of words. And on my list, I had what do we want to do with the customer? We want to connect. This is a learning platform. So we're trying to educate, right? So I'll write down connect, I'll write down educate, I'll write down all these words. Okay, educate. Well, educate, ED. Everybody kind of thinks ED is educate. So what if we took the word connect and then put the ED on the end? We're connected, but we capitalize ED. We're connect ed. So we're connecting with our customers, we're educating them. I thought, well, that's kind of stupid. And it still exists to this day. It's a learning platform where we connect and educate customers. It's called Connect Ed.
I love it. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and this idea of that sometimes chasing stupid can be the start of something smart.
Absolutely. I love that.
And not to discount the stupid idea just because of the fear of what will people think of me. But again, when you're in a boardroom, you're in a meeting, your reputation's on the line, you think, oh, if I say this thing, everybody's going to brand me that forever, right? So you have to be in a safe space. You have to be around people who are there to lift each other up and not tear each other down. Now, for those who can't see you, you've got pink hair.
I do.
And you don't exactly fit the mold of the classic CSI agent. In fact, your personal branding is so effective that people can find you just by searching pink hair CSI. Now, have you always had pink hair? Well, obviously not from birth, but
my mother was a unicorn. And
have you always had pink hair, or was that something that you or the producers of the show decided to do for the show?
That's me. So I haven't always had pink hair, but I've always had colored hair. I did hair model for a while, which basically means you give them permission to do whatever they want, take pictures for social media type of thing. So me, it's just hair, right? It's been pink, purple, green, you name it. I did think I have to pick a color for the show and go with it, right? And it's going to be that for a while because you have to have consistency in your shots and whatnot. And I picked pastel pink. I realize I'm a lot visually, so I wanted to just be a little softer with it, still being myself. That's who I am. I think authenticity is great marketing. It was easy for me to build a brand because the brand is me. And you always have to ask questions when you are doing social media, whenever you're putting your company out there, your brand out there. Is that my brand? Well, my brand is me. It was based on me authentically being me, looking like me. Right? I have a half sleeve of tattoos. My nose is pierced. And I wanted people to say, that's not what I thought was going to come from that.
It helps you stand out for sure. And I think a lot of companies could learn a thing or two from you about branding and how to be memorable. So when we were talking the other day, you mentioned this idea of marketing from the inside out versus marketing from the outside in. What did you mean by that?
I think most typical marketing actions are inside out. We think about how we want to be perceived as a company or a product that we have or whatever that is. So we think about how do we put this on social media, right? What is the picture on social media going to be? What is the thing that we put out there? And that's very inside out. The problem I think with inside out is that, especially, if you're working on a campaign or you work for a company, you have to believe the hype. You have to believe that the thing that you're selling is the best thing that everybody needs and nobody can live without. You have to drink the corporate Kool-Aid, right? And so it's everybody standing around, patting each other on the back, talking about how amazing your product is. Outside in marketing, I think, is a bit the opposite. We want to think about the person that's receiving the message. Who out there do we want to receive the message? How are they receiving the message? Are they scrolling on their phone? Are they on their laptop? Are they listening to radio? How are they receiving the message, first of all? And what is it in that message that we're putting out that's going to affect somebody in a way that's going to make them stop scrolling, not skip the ad? We think about what we're putting out. We don't think about how it's digested. how are people thinking about us when they receive that message?
Yeah. So insight creation, or building insights, as I like to say, it's part art, part science, right? Most insights come from a moment, in my experience. People often say they have a flash of insight, or it happens because of a snippet of conversation, or they have a shower thought moment. But then a lot of times in business, we're asked to back it up. Can you back that up with data? Can you think of an example when you had one of those aha moments on a case? You knew it was right. You knew your insight was there, but then you had to go back things up with data?
Yes. So there's one that jumps to mind because I literally said, man, that's some CSI, like the TV show stuff, right? Because that's really not how it happens. So when it does happen like that, you're like, okay, I'm going to pay attention. I was working a particular case. It was a call out. So I was called out around 2:00 in the morning. It was an elderly woman who lived alone. The house had been burglarized. She was sexually assaulted, beaten, bound, and left to die. So this house had one window over the kitchen sink. It was very small, like 2-bedroom, and it had a door. So I'm trying to establish, right, how does somebody get in and get out? Kind of 101. Well, they got a door, they got a window. Well, the problem with the kitchen window is that they were louvered windows, parallel slats that open together. Well, nobody's going to fit through that. So you have to come and go through the door. That's the way they came and went. So I'm thinking, I'm processing the scene, I'm spending some time in there. And then I walk through the kitchen and I see a plastic dish soap and it's in the sink. It's laying down in the sink. Where do you keep your dish soap? If you were to keep a plastic dish soap, where would you keep it?
On the counter?
On the counter, right behind the sink, kind of at the back part of the sink. Why is it in the sink? Couldn't fit through that window, but did they know that right away? So I go outside to the window and I just had this thought. I put my black powder brush straight onto the glass. The front door was a terrible surface. It was textured wood. Can't really get fingerprints off of that. Soon as my powder brush hit the glass, I developed the most beautiful thumb impressions right and left. And on the inside of the glass, 4 fingers, as if you grasped that piece of glass, thumb on one side, 4 fingers on the other, and tried to lift it. And then went, oop, not going to be able to get in through there. And then went in the front door. So I lifted those fingerprints and I gave them to a deputy on scene. This does not happen. This is not the way crime scene works. And I said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is the suspect. And I need you to drive these right now to get identified. Before I cleared the scene, I was still processing other areas of the house. They found him and he had hopped a flight to New York that morning. And the NYPD was waiting for him when his plane landed in New York. Now we have something that may be the impetus to an aha moment. We've got data. So in that instance, logically, the front door would have been the only way for somebody to come and go. And had I just said, front door is the only way you can go and process that, I would have gotten 0 fingerprints. Seeing a bottle of soap in the sink, that was the aha. Well, just because they didn't come through the window does not mean they didn't try.
Right.
That led me to go find the data, the fingerprints, to then make an arrest in the case.
I love this example.
It's art, it's science, right? There's an art and a science to crime scene. Anybody could just walk into a room and collect everything, right? The art of it is knowing what items are relevant, what items to collect, right? That's the art. I can't tell somebody, you go do ABC. There's no number 4 on the menu. There's no step-by-step. That's the art of crime scene investigation. The science is fingerprint matching. So when we're marketing, we can have that feeling, ooh, that soap bottle, but we got to find the print that says, yes, we're right. That's the direction that we need to go.
And there's a speed element to it as well, which is, okay, what's the soap bottle doing there? I'm going to go dust this area for fingerprints that nobody else would think to, because they'd say, look, it's a louvered window. Nobody's going to be able to get through there. But seeing the soap bottle made you think maybe somebody touched the glass, knocked something over. Was it that they knocked anything over? Is that why the soap bottle was in there? Or
The soap bottle was laying in the basin of the sink. And I knew that a normal person would put it at the back of the sink. So the fact that it was knocked down meant somebody did something enough at that window, whether flipping the louvered glass was what knocked the soap bottle into the sink, I think likely, or maybe trying to reach through the window to unlock a window, do something like that, whatever. There was some not normal action that caused that to be there, right? What should be here that's not, what is here that shouldn't be.
And each situation is going to be different. You just have to go into each situation, keeping your eyes and ears open all the time.
That's it. So I can't listen to somebody when they say they came and went through the door. Okay, that's valid. Doesn't mean they couldn't have also tried somewhere else first. So you can't just take anything at face value. You have to think for yourself. I love to present information and have people come up with their own conclusions. They don't need to agree with me. I don't have an ego stake in that game. In marketing, sometimes the gut feeling or the aha leads to the data. Sometimes the data leads to the aha. I found a fingerprint somewhere else, not made that revelation about the soap and just gotten lucky and gotten a print somewhere else. That could have just been data that started the rest of that journey. Fingerprint leads to that. But for me, it was the aha led to the data.
I think that's what's so hard when you're trying to explain strategy to clients or to people who, again, like you said, they don't know exactly what you do, because everybody wants a strategy playbook, right? And a strategy playbook is important. It's important to have a series of techniques and tools that you use to get to a particular place. But at the same time, there's an improvisational element to it. There is a noticing. There is a way of asking questions that leads to the aha moment. Because a lot of people say, oh, I know how to ask questions. I can ask questions. And it's like, I don't know if you can ask questions the way that this person over here who's been doing it for 15 years is going to ask questions in a more subtle way or in using a particular technique to pull out of the person the information that would otherwise be, locked in there or held behind canned answers.
Yes.
All right. We're moving to the speed round. This has been so awesome. I'm just nerding out on this example. And by the way, good job on catching the person with the NYPD. All right. So speed round. Is there a crime scene term or forensic phrase that sounds way cooler or weirder than it actually is?
Skin glove.
What is that?
Now, it might be way weirder or way cooler depending on your audience. When somebody in a particular case dies and starts to decompose, the skin of the hand can actually come off like a glove, just like you would put on a work glove or anything else. The fingernails stay intact on that glove. But as an investigator, if I have somebody that I see you cringing, if I have somebody that's skeletal or decomposed, the number one thing I need to do is identify who they are. That tells their family, that starts an investigative process. That's the most critical thing, is to identify who somebody is. And so that skin glove, I can then put on my own hand and ink and roll their fingerprints as if they were my own.
I'm not going to be able to sleep as a result of this description.
To me, it's the most respectful thing that I can do, is give somebody their identity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's both grim and beautiful at the same time.
Well, that's my brand.
If you had to explain what you do to a 5-year-old, how would you describe it?
So you and your sister are playing and your sister spills juice on the carpet. Mom and dad are upset. I'm the one you call when you need to prove that it was not you that spilled the juice.
Nice. Is there a smell or a sound or a random detail that instantly brings you back to a particular case?
I don't think a particular case, but to crime scene in general, I think there's some obvious smells that I encounter in crime scene that the normal civilian doesn't. But I think I've already injured your brain enough that I will go with Velcro, the sound of Velcro. So putting on BDU pants with Velcro pockets, or being around people wearing bulletproof vests that are putting on and taking off Velcro, that sound of Velcro reminds me of law enforcement, crime scene.
What are BDU pants?
Battle dress uniform. So those are the typical military pants with the pockets on the side.
I was feeling a little vulnerable there. I wasn't sure.
I appreciate your honesty.
I wasn't sure if I should admit to have never hearing the phrase BDU pants before.
No, that's great because, lingo, I have to remember not everybody's a CSI.
There's jargon in every industry. Do you have a hard time leaving it at the office? How are you able to not be traumatized by the things that you see?
Some cases are harder than others, right? I think key is having a safe space, having a way for you to process that, right? Music and alone time for me are pretty critical. I like to drive, so I will drive, put music on. Having that safe space where you feel like you can feel your feelings is important, because the harder you try to bottle things up or just, I'm going to put this in a box, right? That's the tendency we all want to do. We go, oh, I don't like that. I don't like feeling that. I'm going to put this in this little box, tape it up, shove it up in the attic. That comes out eventually and not in a time or place you want it to. So feel the feelings.
I don't really know how to pivot to the next question, because the next question is so...
Brought to you by Colgate.
La-ti-da, yes. But what's your favorite word in English or any other language?
It's juxtaposition. It's my favorite. It's a great concept, a great term. Long, long ago, before I knew what I was meant to do, I was an art history major. So I love the juxtaposition displayed in art or beauty, right? Finding beauty in an unexpected place. And I love the idea of a softness in a very harsh environment. Those things I think always... If you look, as a matter of fact, on my website or my social media, if it's a photo shoot that I have coordinated, you will spot the juxtaposition.
All right. I will go look it up and look for those particular kinds of photos. What's the most recent good book you've read, or movie you've watched, or TV show?
I recommend Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference.
I think I first found him through Masterclass. So that was how I learned about his radio DJ voice. And then I picked up the book, and it's just a wonderful book.
It really is for any part of life.
What's a subject that you recently got super interested in and you just went down a rabbit hole because of insatiable curiosity?
Oh my gosh. So you're asking that question as if it happens once a week, and it happens 18 times a day. So I will tell you the last thing that I Googled and kind of fell down the rabbit hole, which was, why is the dollar sign what it is? Symbolically, why do we have the little like S with the two lines through it? What is that all about? There are a lot of theories, by the way. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole.
Well, you're making me think about, why does the pound look the way it does, or the euro, or all of... It's a good question. I've never stopped to think about that.
Exactly. You have to think about what you don't think about.
Right. It's like the fish swimming in water. They don't know they're in the water. Is there a brand whose work you really admire, or that you think to yourself, I wish I'd come up with that?
There are a few. I mean, to state the obvious, Liquid Death, my all-time favorite brand, the official water of Crime Scene Confidential, because I requested it to be so. I love bold marketing. I love risky marketing. I'm a big fan of just leaning really hard into your marketing. If you've heard of Last Crumb, it is a high-end bakery. So they're out of California, and they do a box of cookies, about a dozen cookies, probably cost you about $300. When I mean high-end cookies, I mean high-end cookies, right? A lot to be learned from their marketing. Marketing's amazing, website amazing, super slick packaging. I signed up for their text messages because I appreciate how they're constructed.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to have to check them out. They must be sprinkling some saffron into those cookies.
Maybe they're gold dusted. I'm not sure, but they have it right? They've taken this, market that's usually like, 79 cents. And they've made like the Hermes of cookies. They've brought this regality to a cookie where you would gift it to somebody and they'd be like, oh, wow, that is impressive.
Donuts have had that experience as well. I've seen a lot of luxury donuts, and it's interesting when you take something that has been just kind of a ho-hum product for so long, and then you elevate it. You give it some sophistication. You might say, who's going to pay $7 for a donut or more? There are people out there who will.
And it's a trend, right? You talk about trends in your book. And it is, I call it little treat culture. Everybody is, adulting is hard. You have to wake up and go, great, I have to put on pants. I have to be functional and, nice. I can't slap people, whatever, right? We have to grasp all these. I got to make dinner and take kids to school, blah, blah, blah. We are in that, I need a little treat. A thing to look forward to in the day, a way out, a celebration, right? Starbucks has captured the market on little treat culture. Yep. It's not the coffee you buy. You're not going for the coffee. You're going for the break. You're going for who you are when you have a cup of coffee in your hand, who you are when you walk into a meeting with a Starbucks cup, right? They're not marketing coffee. They're
Mm-hmm.
marketing who you are when you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Little treat culture.
I also love this idea of gift culture. You mentioned the box of cookies as like a gift. That's something that Truff hot sauce has done so well, right? It's a $15 bottle of hot sauce in a category where most hot sauces are going to be about $5 maybe. Tabasco's a couple bucks. And so they've taken it to this place of, yes, it's a high price point, but we're going to also put it in this box. We're going to make it look really premium. It's an experience. It's going to feel like something special that gives you permission to spend $15 on a bottle of hot sauce, either for you or for somebody else.
Right. And that's on knowing your audience. Because, I don't see having a discount on Last Crumb, the cookie place that I'm talking about. I don't see having coupons for these things. Chanel, Hermes, they know their audience. They're not offering coupons. They're not offering discounts. You're our customer or you are not.
What's one of the most interesting jobs you had before you got into CSI work that has helped you do your job better?
Teaching college for sure allowed me to focus on another thing that is part of my brand, right? Complex information, talking about DNA or talking about gas chromatography or something. And how do I do that in 2 minutes where somebody feels smarter for having listened, but they feel like they know more and they go, oh, yeah, that wasn't so hard. That makes total sense. So how to take those complex concepts and then boil it down so that everybody would understand exactly what you're talking about.
That's awesome. And what's a piece of advice that you got early on in your life or in your career that you still remember to this day or that you think of often?
Chris, do you like everybody you've ever met?
No.
Then don't expect everyone to like you.
That's good. I have tried to say, to my kids, sometimes if they have like a playground problem or, something comes up, so you don't have to be friends with everybody, but it's good to find ways to get along with people, especially if you're going to be doing a project with them. But that doesn't mean that you have to be friends, but it really helps to learn how to get along with people.
It really does, because in the grown-up world, you're going to work with people that you don't like or you have clashing viewpoints, but you can always find something to respect about that person or find a skill. Wow, I don't want to hang out with them. I don't want to have a beer, but they are the go-to person when it comes to fill in the blank.
Well, I do want to hang out with you more, and you have made me smarter today as a result of this conversation. So thank you, Alina, for taking the time to share your thoughts, your processes, and the fascinating work that you do.
Thank you for understanding the connection and connecting those dots between law enforcement and marketing, because they make a whole lot more sense than you'd think.
Absolutely. Thanks again to our guest, Alina Burroughs, forensic expert and crime scene analyst from the hit show Crime Scene Confidential, now streaming on Max. If you want to connect with Alina, you can find her on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Alina Burroughs. Or you can just Google pink hair CSI lady and she'll show up in spades. If you're looking for even more ideas and aha moments, head over to chriskochek.com. There you can find some of my newest online courses, case studies, and creative exercises for building insights and breakthrough ideas. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the Lightbulb newsletter. Every Thursday, I share 3 aha moments that are guaranteed to inspire your next project, creative briefing, or campaign. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform and share it with friends, family, clients, colleagues, even your enemies. Special thanks to Michael Osborne at 14th Street Studios for producing this episode, and thank you to Megan Palmer for additional editing and production support. Until next time, keep looking for patterns, finding contradictions, and asking what if more often.